Chapter 24 Imbangala. Isaiah Taylor awoke in the long, damp grass. He felt as though he had been out on a spree. As his wits made their return, along with his memory of the last day and a half, he wished that bathtub gin was the root cause of his misery. He sat up, taking stock of his body. His right boot had been torn open when the lion tripped him, and there were fresh gashes there, nothing life-threatening unless left untended. There was a cut on the back of his head, and it throbbed away like a son of a bitch. He figured that must have been from whatever he hit his head on when the lion felled him. He looked behind him for the cause of the injury and saw the cover to Renoir's hidden well. Holy shit. Isaiah looked around, making sure that none of the demons were out and about. Then he lifted the cover and slid himself into the darkness of the well, letting the cover come closed above him. The banging came again, then a pause. Isaiah Taylor's voice was quiet but distinct on the other side of the door. "Somebody best tell Sergeant Major Renoir, stop hollering bloody murder, or he's going to bring them all down right on top of us." Renoir slid the deadbolt free and opened the door. Isaiah limped in. "Francois, Lieutenant Durant?" Renoir asked. "Ain't seen hide nor hair of them in a bit. I assume they follow my lead and split all different which ways, which I can't rightly say." Renoir closed the door and slid the deadbolt home. Caitlin noticed Isaiah's limp. "You're hurt?" "A little bit." He winced as he walked. "Little bitty scratch from a big kitty cat." Caitlin helped him over toward the candlelight. "Sergeant, can you give me some more light?" Renoir lit the other two candle nubs from the one that still burned. "I think you must call me Alexandre, miss. I am not a sergeant anymore. That war is over." Caitlin knew he was right. She studied the wound. "Dr. Halstead, what do you think?" Halstead leaned in and studied the gashes. "Under better circumstances, I would want to stitch it up, but these aren't those circumstances. Let's clean it as best we can and bind it up." Halstead opened a first aid kit he'd gotten from the depot while Caitlin unlaced Isaiah's boot. She pulled it off and unrolled his bloody sock. "What's that bend?" Renoir asked. "Y'all ain't gonna believe it for a minute." "I believe everything now." Isaiah had a hard time believing his recollection himself. "I got chased by 3 naked motherfuckers who was painted blue. Got my ass saved by a fucking lion." He glanced to Caitlin. "Pardon the expression, miss." "Lion." Halstead leaned back. "Yep. Ate those blue motherfuckers right up that it came after me." Halstead poured sodium hypochlorite on Isaiah's cuts. Isaiah clenched his teeth as the antiseptic bubbled in the wounds. "Told you you wasn't going to believe it." Halstead wiped the wound dry with a fresh piece of gauze. "I might not have yesterday, but that Russian bloke had a lion in a cage at the Abbey just before you lot arrived with the wounded German. Maybe it was the same one. I don't know about that. First lion I ever seen. I never seen no naked blue folks neither. A lot of new shit happened I wouldn't have believed for yesterday." Caitlin handed Halstead a fresh bandage. He began to wrap Isaiah's foot. "We need to change this daily. Don't want to risk infection. Seen smaller wounds than this lead to amputation," said Halstead. "Yes, sir. I plan to keep both them feet, doctor. By all means." Caitlin passed Isaiah her canteen, and he drank. "Are you hungry, Corporal?" "Yes, miss, truly. If you're going to call Sergeant Alexandra, I think may have time to give up on formalities. You can call me Isaiah." Caitlin handed him a tin of bully beef. All right, I say. You can call me Caitlin. All right, Miss Caitlin. I'm going to do just that. Durant knelt behind the surgical table, listening as the footfalls of the men hunting him echoed on the gleaming hardwood floors. There were windows behind the sheets. He saw moonlight lighting up tall rectangles in them, and he considered trying to get to those windows and jump. But it was too late. He knew the second he made a sound, his pursuers would be on him. He counted it dumb luck that there were no more than two at the moment. Durant had one of Francois's grenades left. He hoped that it would be enough to do the trick. What he would face after he revealed himself to the rest of the demons in the chateau, he did not know. One at a time. Face these things one at a time. He knew that if he lined them up all together at once, he would simply lay down and die, and he was not ready to do that just yet. He heard their voices, just outside of his operating theatre. Durant pulled the grenade pin. The curtain was ripped aside. Durant lobbed the grenade toward the two men, a hulking beast and the ironically juxtaposed little man beside him. In the same motion, he upended the metal operating table and slid behind it. The half-wit and little man saw their prey throw his grenade and turn the table. Little man kicked the grenade and it skittered away. It exploded, and the spray of shrapnel caught Little Man in the face and forehead, effectively scalping him. But he kept his eyes, so everything remained functional. The half-wit reached over the table and grabbed Durant. One ham-sized fist punched him in the head, knocking him unconscious. The half-wit looked at the shrapnel-disfigured Little Man and burst out laughing. Little Man looked hilarious, with half his skull shining bloody where thick black hair had been moments ago. The half-wit grabbed Durant's limp body and dragged it out from behind the operating table. The Red Maiden would be pleased. This one was special. Francois was covered head to toe in blood. His cutlass scabbard was empty. His heavy grenade satchel bounced against his hip as he ran. His pace was steady, not a sprint, 1 foot in front of the other. He did not have his cutlass, but he had the satchel, and the satchel would set him free, Allah willing. The Imbangala warriors easily kept up, laughing at him, poking at him with the points of their bayonets to guide his direction. The Misungo captain spun Francois's cutlass in his hand and brandished it overhead. He had seen many Portuguese slavers with the same weapons as a child warrior, and had always wondered how it would feel to wield one in battle. Now he had his very own, and he was keen to try it on his former owner. They ran him past the British trenches and into the elevated terrain beyond it. They crested a small hill, and Francois immediately recognized where they were. The spent 12-inch brass shells and the stacked shells all caught moonlight and reflected it back dully. He recognized the tall cylinder of the big British railway gun pointing skyward. The surrounding ring of impaled men and women seemed to stand like scarecrows above a savage, cold harvest of explosives and brass. When they were overlooking the gun battery, rough hands stopped him and let them force him to a knee. Two of the Imbangala grabbed a long timber, its end already hacked into a sharp point. They dragged it toward Francois. Francois found the clasp on his satchel strap and unclipped it, letting it slip free. He slid his hand into the satchel and blindly grasped one of the 5 grenades, spinning it in his palm until he felt the pin. He looped a finger through the ring, the couple to the pin, and wiggled it until the pin slipped free. He held the lever in place. 4 seconds. He would have a 4-second fuse delay once he let the lever drop. He was certain that would not give him enough time, but it was more than nothing. He heard the Mizungo captain burbling in Imbangala to his squadron and cutting the air with his cutlass. Francois knew that his time was up. He let the lever come free. He used his bent front leg to launch. He ran. The Imbangala cried out, 1,000. Francois tossed the satchel into the ordered stacks of 12-inch shells. 1,000. Pell-mell, he tore down the slope, the Imbangala 10 yards behind him enclosing. 1,000. His pace did not falter. He heard the nearest man gaining on him, screaming in a language he did not understand. 1,000. He heard the grenade go. There was a half-second more, then a concussive blast hit him from behind and sent him flying. Francois felt the heat singe his neck. He went face first to the ground. Hot shrapnel ripped past above him. The magnesium from a dozen star shells seared the black of night into white-hot day. The Musungu captain rose up behind him, backlit by the fire, towering over Francois, bellowing, the cutlass raised overhead. The thunderclap of another shell bursting sounded, and shrapnel from one of the British 12-inch shells tore through him, turning him into an immolated rag doll. The useless husk scattered to the ground. Francois buried himself in the earth and covered his ears. The world was on fire. The explosions continued for 5 minutes. When the last one abated, nothing remained to prove that the Imbangala, the British artillery battery, or the impaled bodies that had ringed it so recently had ever been. Francois reached out to push himself to standing and touched a hot piece of metal. His hand recoiled at first, but it was familiar. Under the light of the fading star shells, he saw the soot-blackened steel of his cutlass. He wrapped the cuff of his sleeve around his hand. Then he picked up the searing hot blade and ran. The half-wit pulled Durant by one leg through the halls of the chateau. Durant's eyes opened. The little man who had lost half his scalp and face to the grenade was walking behind him. The half-wit dragged him down the stairs, bouncing his head and body ungently off the stones. Then he pulled him across the foyer to where the Red Maiden and her cohort awaited. They came and surrounded him. Durant saw the German cavalry officer, hair thickly matted with dried blood, approach and kneel beside him. It reached down and touched his cheek. There was a burst of electrical charge, and images seared into his brain replayed themselves. Durant saw his father's head bounce off the stairs, and he was certain it had killed him. Nathaniel landed bad. His neck twisted in an unfortunate fashion. David felt Matthew rush down the stairs past him to their father's side. To David, it all seemed to be happening underwater. There was a dreamlike quality to it that made everything feel like it was going at half speed. Matthew was sober now. He knelt by his father. Nathaniel's eyes opened. His right hand swung up like a club, catching Matthew in the head. With his left, he grabbed Matthew's shirt front and tried to pull him into punching range as he swung that vicious right again. Matthew managed to get his arm up to stop the punch. Then he swung his own fist right down as hard as he could, stunning Nathaniel with a blow between the eyes. The grip on Matthew's shirt sagged, and Matthew seized the moment. He got both hands on Nathaniel's throat and began throttling him. Nathaniel grabbed at Matthew's hands, swinging his arms feebly, trying to dislodge his son's grip. In 30 horror-filled seconds, Matthew choked Nathaniel unconscious. He held on to Nathaniel's throat for another 60 seconds beyond that. Then he sat back and caught his breath. He glanced up the stairs and saw David standing there, frozen, tears pouring down his cheeks. Matthew took a moment, then grabbed the front of Nathaniel's robe and hauled the big man's limp form toward him. He got Nathaniel into a sitting position, then he squatted, got a grip underneath Nathaniel's armpits, and wrapped his arm around his midsection. He held him in a bear hug, then lifted with all his might. He got into a slumped, standing position on the landing. Then with all his remaining strength, he shoved his father backward. The body bounced and tumbled, crashed and rolled, piling into a broken heap at the bottom of the stairs, his neck at an impossible angle. The Red Maiden took her hand off Durant's face and sat back. She was perplexed. Part of her wanted to purge the soul and take this body. It was beaten but unwounded. And as much as she wanted a female form, she wanted a strong vessel to fill, and this was that. But she knew that she should not. Voices in her head told her so. This one belonged to someone else, and she must deliver him, or she would be the one to suffer the consequences. She reached out for just one more delicious taste of his memories. Durant tried to shove her hands away. She punched him as hard as she could, knocking him into the stone floor. Durant started fading back in and out of consciousness. He was being dragged through the mud by his legs. His hands and feet had been bound tightly with strands of barbed wire that were cutting off circulation, nixing any feeling in his fingers. He passed out, tumbling down into darkness. Durant came to again. They had stopped. He was lying face down. He turned his head to the side and listened to the voices chattering around him in a cornucopia of languages. He recognized the French and German, but there must have been a half dozen that he could not begin to place. There was a distant pop as Francois's grenade exploded. Then the ground and earth rolled as the artillery battery blew sky high, a kilometer distant, lighting up the night with an incredible display. There was shock and joy amongst the demons as the surprise and chaos of the explosions roared. Orders were barked, and Durant saw most of the pack run, disappearing into the night in the direction of the detonations. Rough hands grabbed Durant and rolled him over. In the moonlight, Durant made out what was left of a face. It was the little man. When he grinned at Durant, he saw all the thing's teeth. "We are stuck here with this one. We should kill him and run after." "She says we must watch over him, and we must." The little man kicked Durant for the fun of it. "This is boring. Why not hunt the ones that matter? This one's gone." "Not yet gone. Will be soon, and he matters, brother. He matters much. Let us prepare the way for him. By fire, brother, by fire. On Moriah, for my friend." Little man shrugged. "As you wish, but there's no Mount Moriah here to be had." The half-wit paused, digesting his disappointment. "How far is it?" "Leagues and leagues and leagues, fool. Just let me make him go with my hammer and be done with it." There was a long pause. Then the half-wit clapped his hands with glee. "Yes, yes, brother. I know a mountain of Moriah. I have seen it built. The brothers and sisters built it. We will take him there and prepare the way." The little man, missing a third of his face, sighed. "All right, but quick, fool. Dawn will not wait." The half-wit looked down at Durant with his comrade. Then he punched Durant in the head again, knocking him senseless.